when they've got access to the Venezuelan oil? What leverage do we have in Canada, and wouldn't that make that pipeline a short-term solution?
Is that the Americans take heavy Venezuelan oil, getting the federal government out of the way to approve private industry to build a pipeline from northern Alberta to the Pacific, where it can go on a ship off to Asia, so we don't need the Americans anymore.
When USA is refining it on its own and giving it out to the global markets.
The federal government is solely responsible for approving pipelines.
What are the actionable steps that need to happen to make sure that Canada is becoming more affordable?
This is not normal. The Liberals created this situation. It was affordable before this Liberal government.
The fact that USA has interfered with a sovereign state, and now USA President Donald Trump is saying that he's going to be targeting other countries, Greenland being one of them.
To be clear, you say interfered. The defeated candidate for the presidency of Venezuela.
What USA has done, going and getting a sitting president of Venezuela.
He's not the president.
Hi, this is Manraj Grewal. You're watching Prime Asia TV, and today we're talking with the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the leader of the official opposition in Canada, Pierre Poilievre. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Manraj.
My first question has to be about the Venezuela situation. You've said that the proposed solution is fast-tracking the pipeline. My concern is that it's going to be going through tankers, right? That's obviously going to increase the cost of the transportation. And USA isn't going to like it very much because right now they've almost got a monopoly on Canadian oil. They're getting it for very cheap. And so what incentive are they going to have to refine it and send it back to us, especially when they've got access to the Venezuelan oil? And third, when the Venezuelan oil goes global, because USA is going to try everything because they're investing billions in it. What incentive do they have, and what leverage do we have in Canada, and wouldn't that make that pipeline a short-term solution?
Why would you see it as a short-term solution?
Because it's going to increase the cost. We don't have refineries in Canada to be refining our own oil. If USA says, you know what, we've got the Venezuelan oil, we're not going to refine the oil for you anymore, what leverage do we have? I mean, we don't have the infrastructure to support the oil ourselves. The consumers are going to see increased oil prices because if we have to send our oil to be refined to Asia and then get it back. Well,
we wouldn't be getting it back. Our purpose would be to sell it to Asia.
Right.
And so we wouldn't need to refine it here in that case. Oil that we put in a pipeline to the Pacific would go on a tanker and it would be sent off to Asia, and Asian refineries would use it for Asian customers. We would be getting what do we get out of that? $30 billion a year, which would make it the single biggest increase in overseas exports in the history of Canada. For context, $30 billion works out to, we're right around $1,500 in GDP per family in Canada. So, to give you a perspective, it would be twice as much value would go through that pipeline as goes through the St. Lawrence Seaway today. And we wouldn't need the Americans because we'd be going overseas to Asian and other markets that the Americans don't control. The danger we have right now is that the Americans take heavy Venezuelan oil and use it to replace heavy Alberta oil.
Right.
And then what they'll be able to say to us is, we don't need your oil anymore. You're going to have to sell it to us at a huge discount. So the way that we get our leverage back is by getting the federal government out of the way to approve private industry to build a pipeline from northern Alberta to the Pacific, where it can go on a ship off to Asia, so we don't need the Americans anymore. This would boost our dollar so that your food, gas, and housing would be more affordable. It would boost tax revenues for schools, hospitals, and roads, and it would make us more independent from the Americans.
But how would we be refining the oil that the Canadians need? Where would we be getting that? And also, when the Venezuelan oil becomes competitive at a global scale, how are we competing with that when USA is refining it on its own and giving it out to the global markets?
Well, so you've asked a number of questions on refineries. I agree, we need more refineries. In fact, even here in British Columbia, you get the gasoline and jet fuel and stuff comes from American refineries. Why don't we approve the refineries in British Columbia so that we can have refined oil, refined Canadian oil on Canadian soil? I agree with that as well. We can do both. We have some of the biggest reserves of oil anywhere on Earth. We have more oil than we'll ever be able to use, so we should be refining it here. We should also be sending it to Asia. All of that will bring more affordable energy to Canadians, more powerful dollars that are worth more money for schools and hospitals without raising taxes. In other words, but for it to happen, we need to get the federal government out of the way. That's the only reason this isn't happening. We have the second slowest permits in the OECD. We have anti-oil and anti-energy laws, and we have high federal industrial carbon taxes that make it expensive. So get the federal government out of the way, and let's unlock our resource economy to be strong, self-reliant, and sovereign.
But we would need private investments,
Yes.
right? Alberta is in the middle of its own referendum going on, right? Sovereign, are they trying to separate from Canada? So how would a private investor feel comfortable when it's so risky right now? You know, why would they want to invest in something like this when right now it's so risky?
And the big risk right now is the federal government, because Mark Carney is against the oil and gas industry. He wrote an entire book opposing it, saying we need to keep half of our oil in the ground. He supported more carbon taxes. He hasn't approved a single pipeline or gotten rid of a single liberal bureaucracy or law that has been holding back our industry. We do have, but all of that political risk is gone when I become prime minister, because I will get the federal government out of the way and allow for the hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that is desperate for these highly profitable projects to go ahead.
But what about Alberta? I mean,
well, a very simple solution to that. Why do some Albertans want to separate? Because the Carney Liberals are attacking their single biggest industry, blocking pipelines, taxing, bringing in an industrial carbon tax, standing in the way of expanding the oil and gas sector. There was no separatist movement when the Conservatives were in power. This is another liberal crisis. If you want an end to a liberal crisis, bring an end to the liberal government. You've got your solution.
But right now, what would be the immediate solution? Because what we're talking about could take
Get out of the way. Get out of the way. It's really that simple. The federal government is solely responsible for approving pipelines, and the federal government is the one blocking the project and stoking separatism in Alberta. Get the federal government out of the way, and you solve two problems. We boom our oil and gas sector with massive paychecks, a more powerful dollar, affordable energy for our consumers, more independence from the Americans. And what do you know? All those beautiful people in rural Alberta who are upset with the way the country's working are all of a sudden going to be very happy, and you won't have a separatist problem. I know, I'm from Alberta. I was born and raised. There's only ever been separatist movements there when liberals are in power. Get them out, unite the country, move forward.
Right, we're talking about affordability, and you talk about that quite a lot. You said, people aren't having kids because they don't think that it can be affordable.
That's right.
We're not seeing ourselves as homeowners.
Yeah.
And recently a report came out that said the top CEOs in Canada are earning what people, like normal working people, are earning in a year. They're earning in 8 hours.
Yeah.
So clearly something needs to change. But what are the actionable steps that need to happen to make sure that Canada is becoming more affordable?
Well, it was affordable before this liberal government. I think you said you're in your early 20s. When I was your age, we understood that if we worked, we could have a home by the time we were 26 or 27 that we own. That was normal. What young people need to appreciate is that this is not normal. This idea where you have to wait till you're 40 years old to own a house, this is not normal. The Liberals created this situation. They printed money, driving up the cost of everything. They funded bureaucracies that block home building. They were still taxing home purchases, and they increased the population way faster than the housing stock and gave us double the housing cost. So the solution is to reverse all the liberal policies. We have to stop printing money by getting rid of the inflationary deficits. We have to get all taxes off home building. So a third of the cost of home building is just taxes. Get rid of those taxes. The GST, land transfer tax, cut back on the development charges, and grant fast permits and more land to build on. And all of a sudden, housing will be affordable. Housing should be dirt cheap in Canada because we have the most dirt to build on.
Yeah.
So why can't we have affordable homes? Because the government is driving up the cost. Get the government out of the way, and you'll be able to afford a house.
Moving on to immigration, which is another huge topic,
Yes.
and it has been for quite many years.
Yeah.
We know that Canada needs immigration. We know that we've got an aging population. We know that people in Canada, for whatever reason, are not having kids. So we know that we need immigrants, especially in rural communities. There's jobs available. So what would a successful immigration system look like, according to you?
Well, it's the one we had before the Liberal government. We had a very successful system that was not even controversial. We brought in people in numbers that we could absorb into our housing, healthcare, and job markets, and into our way of life. We integrated people. Neighborhoods were filled with people of all different backgrounds, and they all got along. The problem is, over the last 10 years, the numbers have been way too high. And as a result, we've been adding people 3 times faster than we add jobs, homes, and doctors. And that has put pressure on the system. So we have to get back to normal levels. We also have to bring in what I call a blue seal so that immigrant professionals can actually work in their fields. We have immigrant doctors, nurses who can't get a job, not because they're unqualified, but because they can't get a license. Now, what I'm proposing is that we do in the professions what we did in the trades, which is to have a national license for professionals that they can take a test, prove they're qualified, and then go to work in our hospitals. We've got 20,000 immigrant doctors, 32,000 immigrant nurses who can't work while we have waiting lines in our hospitals. Why not get them working if they prove they're qualified? This would be a great way to boost paychecks for newcomers and the quality of life for everyone else.
Yeah. Moving on to South Asian, especially living in BC and Surrey, we've seen so many extortion cases. It's of course impacting the community on a very emotional level, on a very economical level. So we've heard that there has been foreign interference regarding extortion. We've seen so many cases in Surrey and Brampton. Is that still happening? How can someone sitting in another country interfere into our citizens' lives? How can they impact our safety? Is that still happening? And how can that be controlled?
Well, the extortion is definitely still happening. I was just at another radio station today where I personally witnessed the bullet holes right in the recording studio. In fact, I'm sitting in the studio and there's a bullet hole right in front of me. It means the bullet would have hit me in the head if I happened to be sitting there when the shots had come through. But extortions are up 500% under this Liberal government. And why? Well, it's obvious. One, the Liberals let the Bishnoi gang into Canada by unverified, uncontrolled issuance of visitor visas. So people who have criminal records who are associated with the Bishnoi gang came in to our country as visitors. They're not even immigrants to our country. They're just visitors. And others who participate are not facing any penalties. You've got liberal laws like C-75, catch and release bail, C-5, which reduced the penalty for extortion and got rid of mandatory prison sentences. These liberal laws have consequences. So we're proposing to reverse everything the Liberals have done on crime. Tim Singh Uppal, my deputy leader, has a bill to bring in mandatory prison sentences for extortion of 10 years. We're also going to get rid of catch and release bail. Someone who has 3 prior convictions, no longer eligible for bail. Jail, not bail. Finally, we will kick out anybody who's visiting our country that engages in crime and secure our borders to make sure foreign criminals never get back in.
Now, I wanted to get out all the local and the national issues that are impacting us, all the questions before.
Yes.
My last question is just regarding, you had supported that, what USA has done, going and getting a sitting president of Venezuela.
He's not the president.
Right. But
he was never the president. He was defeated in 2 subsequent elections. And that's the position of the European governments, I should say, the Canadian government and the American administration. He clearly lost the election. In fact, the opposing Democratic challenger, Edmundo Gonzalez, got 70% of the vote. So Maduro was just a gangster who was controlling the country illegally. And he was very thankfully, arrested for the crimes that he's committed that have killed thousands of people, particularly by exporting drugs across the Caribbean. So I think all of us should be happy that this gangster has been removed. And now the next thing is let's get Edmundo Gonzalez, the winner of the last Venezuelan election, and Maria Corina Machado, his partner, who just won the Nobel Peace Prize for her championing human rights and democracy. That partnership, they are the legitimate government of Venezuela, and let's get them into power.
But the fact that USA has interfered with a sovereign state, and now USA President Donald Trump is saying that he's going to be, targeting other countries, Greenland being one of them.
To be clear, you say interfered. What do you call it when the defeated candidate for the presidency of Venezuela was being kept in power by Cuba, China, and Iran? Do you call that interference?
Right. Well, I mean, I think every country should be governing itself.
Right. But that's not what was happening. When the American forces went in, you know who was guarding the president of Venezuela? Not the president, the gangster who in charge in the presidential palace. You know who was guarding? Cubans. It wasn't actually a Venezuelan government. It was controlled by the communist regime from Havana. A foreign government was actually effectively running the presidential palace by keeping this defeated gangster in power. So let's be clear, this was not a Venezuelan leader removed by the Americans. This was a leader propped up by Iranian terrorists, by Chinese communists, and by Cuban dictators to rob the people of Venezuela of their oil wealth. And I'm very thankful, as is my wife, who is Venezuelan, by the way, and her whole family were in tears of joy when they learned that this gangster had been removed. And because they have, their extended families suffered so much under that dictatorship. So now the question is whether we're going to have a democracy there, and I think we must. The American government should move as quickly as possible to allow Edmundo Gonzalez, the winner of the election, who's internationally recognized. It's not my opinion. Basically every democracy in the world recognized him as the winner. He should be in power, and the Venezuelans should be able to govern themselves, like you said.
Yeah, but doesn't that set up like a dangerous precedent? I mean, now he's targeting other countries, supporting an act like this. Doesn't that set up a dangerous precedent for other countries? I mean, one day, what if he turns towards Canada, right? Like that power, when left unchecked, could be very dangerous.
The difference is that we don't have a dictatorship headed by someone who lost the election and is being run by foreign governments in charge in Ottawa. That's the completely different. That's the difference between Canada and Venezuela, obviously. So the reality is that Venezuela was being subject to foreign dominance by Iran, by China, by Cuba. And I find it really interesting that none of the people who object to having this gangster removed had any problem with Iran and Cuba and China running and stealing from the people of Venezuela, stealing their oil, leaving them in poverty, mass starvation. The richest country in oil in the world, and the people are starving under this foreign-controlled dictator and gangster. Nobody had any problem with that. No protests, no objections, but now suddenly that he's removed, we have all this outrage from the leftist opponents. So I find that a very strange irony.
I think the issue is not that anybody should be controlling Venezuela. I think the issue is that USA said that they will be controlling the oil, that they will be going in and, getting in private oil companies there. Well, Venezuela doesn't get much say in that either. They're not getting to govern their own oil industry either. I think the issue is of the interference of anybody. I think interference of anybody in a sovereign state should be considered unethical, and it should be considered wrong. And that act should be deemed completely unethical.
Which act?
Of just going in a sovereign state. Yes, it should not be controlled.
But they weren't sovereign, though. They weren't sovereign.
But Venezuela is not getting any control either now.
They weren't sovereign. They were controlled by Iran. I'm sort of covering the same territory as I started with already. They're already being controlled by foreign powers. And what we need is for democracy to be restored. Edmundo Gonzalez, winner of the election. Like I said in my very, very first post on this, now we need Edmundo Gonzalez, the democratically elected winner of the election, along with the great Maria Corina Machado, probably the world's greatest champion of democracy and human rights, who, by the way, she would have won the election, but Maduro banned her from running because, of course, she was going to thump him in the election. But those two should be governing Venezuela. And then there should be another set of elections, and then the people of Venezuela will choose their next leader. And that would be a wonderful, inspirational story for all of us.
Of course. But should USA be going in and saying that they're going to be controlling the oil industries before that election happens, before the government themselves decide who's going to come in, what's going to happen, what the next step should be?
Well, like I said, we need to get to an election and a democracy. I think we're going back over the same ground again and again. But I believe that it should be a democracy, and it would be a wonderful future for Venezuela and for all Canadians as well, to celebrate the shared values of human rights, sovereignty, and democracy when the truly elected leaders are actually able to take control again, take control in the future.
Right. Great. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you very much for your questions, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. That was Pierre Poilievre. Today we talked about what the next steps should be regarding the Venezuela situation, how Canada can protect its own economy, about what the next steps look like for healthcare, for immigration. And that was all for our program today. This is Prime Asia.